araw, biglang uulan. Nararamdaman niyo ba ang pagbabago ng klima? Ito na siguro ang tinatawag nating climate change. Madalas nating naririnig ito sa mga balita. Pero ano nga ba ang climate change? Dahil sa pagbilis ng pagtaas ng klima, ng mundo na hindi maiwasan ng mga matatanda na may hantulad ang pagkagunaw ng mundo.
Good day, Fatimanians. Now we are here at Our Lady of Fatima University to interview some students regarding their opinion about climate change.
Sa pinakamadali at madaling intindihin, so yung climate change po yung mga pagbabago po ng mga panahon like tag-ulan, tag-araw, yun po.
So what is climate change?
Ano ba yung climate change? Yun yung yung kapag nagbabago na yung klima, diba? Yung climate change. Yan. Yun na yan? Factors na nag-aapekto ng climate change. So, it's either greenhouse gases, yun nga yung kapag natutunaw na yung mga iceberg sa Antarctica tapos tumataas na yung level ng water. Sabi nga nila yung Pilipinas daw matatabunan na ng tubig. So, be careful po tayo kasi po another dahilan po niyan yung pagsusunog po ng mga toxic materials po na napupunta sa atmosphere natin. Kaya nasisira po yung ozone layer natin. Tapos yung ultraviolet rays po natin, lumalabas po yan, tumatagos po yun dito. So, yun po, be careful po tayo sa sa pagsunog ng mga bagay. So, yun lang po.
Thank you. So what is climate change?
Para sa akin yung climate change yun yung malaking problema ng mundo natin na kung saan maraming tao nakakapektuhan sa pagbabago ng klima, sa mga sakunang nangyayari. Tsaka hindi lang sa tao to nakakaapekto, pati sa mga hayop na sa kapaligiran natin na kung hindi natin mapipigilan, kung hindi natin maiwasan, maaaring masira yung mundo, tas sa uli tayo lang rin mamomblema.
Para sa akin yung climate change, yun yung pagbabago ng panahon natin na hindi naakma dun sa nakasanayan nating panahon tulad nung, halimbawa kung summer, hindi na katulad dati na pag summer, tag-araw lang siya ng buong buwan, nagkakaroon na tayo ng tag-ulan kahit summer. At pagka alam naman natin panahon ng tag-ulan, nagkakaroon tayo ng mas mahabang panahon na tag-araw. Yeah.
Ayon sa mga eksperto ng pag-asa, ito na ang signs ng malawakang pagbabago ng panahon.
Sa assessment report na inilabas nila noong 2007, based on climate models worldwide, inilahad nila na ang mga senyales ng climate change. Una sa mga senyales ay ang unti-unting pag-init ng mundo o ang tinatawag nila na global warming na madalas nating marinig.
Kailangan nyo muna maintindihan yung process ng greenhouse effect, the greenhouse effects. Yung greenhouse effect kasi, yun yung natural warming process ng mechanism ng world. So, ang process na yun, nag-i-involve ng mga gases in the atmosphere na, example, carbon dioxide, methane, tatawag natin sila ng greenhouse gases. Ngayon, ang ginagawa ng greenhouse gases, yung solar radiation na pumapasok sa Earth, ina-absorb kasi yan ng surface ng Earth, tapos nire-release na ulit nire-reflect na back to the atmosphere. Yung mga gases na nire-release ng surface of the Earth, yung energy na nire-release ng surface of the Earth, yun yung energy na na-absorb ng greenhouse gases. So, naturally, tama lang yung heat na nakukuha ng Earth from the greenhouse gases. So, it's not exactly yung direct sunlight na nagpapainit sa Earth, but the warmth na nakukuha, but the emitted heat na nakukuha from the surface of the Earth. So ngayon, nangyayari yung global warming kasi dumadami yung mga greenhouse gases sa atmosphere. So, na-exacerbate yung heating process.
Our story starts in 1896 in Sweden with this guy, Svante Arrhenius, a chemist. Arrhenius is the first person to figure out that putting CO2 into the atmosphere could make the Earth warmer. But the prevailing wisdom of the time says that there is an infallible balance of nature which no human actions could ever possibly disturb, so nobody takes Arrhenius very seriously until 1938, when an engineer named Guy Stewart Callender decides to look at global temperatures recorded over the past 50 years or so and figures out, hey, what do you know, the Earth is getting warmer. War breaks out in 1939. Ends in 1945. And as the world's economy recovers, industrial production goes into overdrive. Burning of coal and oil puts so much sulfur pollution into the atmosphere that it partially blocks the sun's rays, and the world actually gets slightly cooler over the next 3 decades. In the 1950s, scientists start looking more closely at the possible effects of CO2 emissions on global temperatures. For the first time, we start to realize that we could have a major problem on our hands.
A few degrees rise in the Earth's temperature would melt the polar ice caps.
But the Cold War is in full swing, and we have more immediate existential threats to think about, like nuclear holocaust.
Duck, and then cover.
In the 1960s, the cooling trend continues, and there's even some fringe speculation that we could be heading for a new ice age. That all changes in the mid-70s when temperatures start going up again. The phrase global warming makes its first appearance in a 1975 research paper. Temperatures keep rising throughout the 80s, and 1988 is the hottest year ever recorded to that point. This gets people's attention, and global warming starts to enter mainstream public awareness for the first time.
Human activities are changing the atmosphere.
We face a global environmental crisis.
The global threat of climate change.
Yes, that's Margaret Thatcher, one of the first world leaders to speak out about climate change. Interesting, right? Anyway, in 1995, an international group of scientists issues the first public statement that there is a discernible human influence on global climate. In 2001, they predict that 21st century warming will leave the 20th century in the dust. Over the next decade, some of the anticipated effects of global warming start happening. Things like rising oceans, intense droughts and heat waves, and powerful storms. The 15 hottest years in history have all occurred since 1998, and 2015 is on track to be the hottest year ever recorded. So what does the future hold? If we curb CO2 emissions, temperatures could rise as little as 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit by 2099. That would be manageable. If we don't, temperatures could rise more than 8 degrees, which would mean massive food shortages, widespread extinctions, and a redrawing of the world's coastlines. The story of global warming will end with a changed climate. That's inevitable at this point. How much it will change remains to be seen.
Nararanasan na ba natin dito sa Pilipinas ang global warming? O ayon sa pag-aaral ng ating mga scientists. As early as 1979, may mga napapansin na ang mga scientists natin tungkol dyan sa biglang pagtaas ng temperatura. Ayon sa report ng IPCC na nirelease nila noong 2007, sinasabi doon na tumaas na ang ating temperatura above normal temperature.
May ginawang study yung mga scientists around the world. Trinay nilang i-simulate yung temperature ng Earth through tawag natin na climate models. Yung climate models, mga sila, computer models. Ginagayan niya yung behavior ng atmosphere through formulas, mga equations. Ang nangyari ngayon, nakita nila na pag natural warming lang, I mean, yung warming from natural process, ibig sabihin yung greenhouse gases na concentration sa atmosphere is based lang sa natural na nakikita sa atmosphere. At nakita nila na yung temperature, ganito na yung level. Pero, yung level na yun is hindi tugma sa level ng temperature natin ngayon. Tsaka yung level of greenhouse gas na nakikita dun sa simulation is hindi pareha sa level ng amount of greenhouse gas na meron tayo sa real world. So, yun, nalaman nila na masyadong mas marami yung greenhouse gas ngayon kesa sa greenhouse gas na nakita nila dun sa simulation.
Sa mga lugar na inland na malalayo sa mga coastal area, kung magkakaroon ng pagbaha at mataas ang tubig dagat, hindi makadaloy ang tubig. Ibig sabihin, mas matagal pa ang pagbaha. Ayon sa mga testimonyang ibinigay ng mga naninirahan sa Navotas, Malabon at Ubando, Bulacan, na high tide ang mas matagal bumaba ang tubig. Ito ay isa sa mga epekto ng global warming.
Sa coming decades, actually yung effect ng climate, global warming, or climate change in particular, hindi pa talaga siya ganun ka-apparent sa mga 10 years from now, 20 years. mostly siguro mga 50 years. But if within 50 years, doon na natin makikita yung major effect ng climate change. For one, yung warming nga, mas mainit na yung panahon. Tapos, more reduction sa yield. Tapos, pag-increase ng sea level. Tapos, further reduction sa volume ng ice sa North, South Pole, sa Arctic ice. Tapos, although hindi directly siguro sa mga animals, sa mga animals sa biosphere, makapagpag din sila. Tapos, yung yun. Tsaka yung sa kwan pa pala, na-project din namin yung effect na sa tropical cyclones. Kung mapapansin nyo, mas, I don't think, hindi pa siguro gano'n ka-obvious na nababawasan yung tropical cyclones ngayon. Pero ang nangyayari, nag-i-increase yung intensity ng tropical cyclones. Kaya for example, si Ayan, na mas malakas. Isa sa mga pinakamalakas na tropical cyclones sa Philippines. And then, yun, gaya ng mga areas sa Mindanao na hindi masyadong nakaka-experience ng tropical cyclones, ngayon nakaka-experience na sila. So, nag-increase na intensity ng mga tropical cyclones. Yun, isa sa mga nakikita ng mga models natin. Fewer yung tropical cyclones, pero mas intense yung effect nila.
Hindi lamang ang pagtaas ng sea level ang dulot ng pag-init ng tubig. Nandyan ang tinatawag na coral bleaching na nakakapinsala sa mga yamang dagat sa karagatan. Bukod sa coral bleaching at sea level rise, may isa pang impact ang warmer oceans kapag bumibilis din ang temperature at bumibilis din ang evaporation na nakakaapekto sa pabago-bago ng panahon. Ang pinaka-pinag-uusapan talaga ay ang average at ang condition ng climate change. Pero dito sa ating bansa, ang worst case scenario natin ay ang extreme events. Ito yung mga tagtuyot talaga, walang tubig, at kung naman uulan ay maraming baha sa iba't ibang lugar at mga iba pang mga bagyo.
Marami. For one, kasi meron tayong tinatawag na critical temperature sa climate change na gustong iwasan. For example, ng mga nations through the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Gusto nilang iwasan as much as possible. By 2 degrees, actually ngayon pa nga lang yung nasa all close to 2 degrees na kasi increase ng temperature. One major impact nga ng climate change is increase ng temperature. So, from that increase in temperature, maraming subsequent impacts na nangyayari. So, palapit na tayo sa 2 degrees. And napansin nila na one major impact is yung pagkasira ng mga corals. Kasi may tinatawag tayo na coral bleaching. So, I'm not sure kung tama ba I think it's 80%. Makikita niyo naman, mapapansin niyo naman how much yung increase. And then meron mo siyang parang slightly good effect sa ibang parts ng world kasi yung ibang parts ng mundo tumataas yung yield nila sa agriculture while in other parts of the world bumababa. But then eventually siguro pagdating natin ng 3 degrees increase na 4 degrees increase, lahat yun bababa na yung yield sa agriculture. Tapos yun sa drought kasi the warmer the atmosphere is, mas malaki yung tendency na pagkawala ng tubig sa mga, particularly sa mga maiinit na lugar like sa Africa. Mostly.
Isa sa mga sanhi ng climate change ay ang volcanic eruption. Volcanoes cool the planet by shading incoming solar radiation. Cooling can last 4 months to years. Isa sa mga halimbawa nito ay ang Mount Pinatubo Eruption noong June 15, 1991 na nagpalamig sa klima ng mundo na napakatagal.
Until one fine day in April 1991, when residents on both sides of Pinatubo noticed white smoke rising out of the mountain. They were the first clear sign that the sleeping volcano had awakened once again. Why did Mount Pinatubo erupt in 1991? The quick answer to that question is because it was time. If we look at the record of previous eruptions, the periods of response had been progressively shortening. Look at the gaps between eruptions. 18,000 years, followed by 8,000 years, followed by 4,000 years, followed by 2,700 years, followed by 1,600 years. The gap between 1991 eruption and the previous one was only 500 years. Was that the normal according to the record of progressively diminishing gaps between eruptions? Or was it premature by 500 or 1,000 years?
Louder.
Medyo, ang alam ko political yung issue nila. Hindi na climate change yung effect dun kasi alam ko yung mga sinunog na mga puno dun, hindi naman kasi kung yun, hindi naman dahil sa natural ng forest fire kasi tropical area yung Amazon eh. Medyo madalas basado.
Makaka-apekto po ba yun sa...
Ay, oo. Actually, makaka-apekto. Kasi may isang nga sa greenhouse gases yung carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is absorbed by trees, by the plants. I'm not sure kung gaano kalaki yung nabawasan na trees dun sa Amazon or ilang percentage yung composition ng trees na yun sa global number of trees na meron tayo. But then, magiging effect ng climate change or ng warming. In our own small way, kasi global warming, hindi kasi pwedeng sabihin na Pilipinas na gagalaw or kasi hindi naman tayo major contributor ng greenhouse gases kasi hindi ko compare yung emission natin dito, mas malaki talaga sa mga bigger countries like China, US. Pero in our own way, siguro ang pinakamalaking contribution na pwede natin gawin is to dagdagan yung trees sa environment natin. Tapos yung pagbabawas sa gamit ng mga vehicles natin. Yan, pwedeng lakad commute na lesser yung vehicles natin. Kasi mas malaki talaga rin yung contribution ng carbon dioxide sa warming. Actually, kahit yung mga alaga natin, mga alagang baboy, mga alagang baka, kasi yung mga dumi nila, nagre-release din kasi ng methane gas yun. So, yun, reduce yung consumption ng meat. Marami naman tayong but then again, kung Pilipinas ay gagalaw una, or pwede namang mag-advocate tayo sa social media about climate change. Mas much better siguro yung the effects of climate change. Pwede natin gawin. So far, yun, so far nga, yung gaya nung sanabi ko kanina, hindi ko pa pala nasabi na yung past years since 2018, 2016, 2017, or 2018, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018 had been yung warmest years na na-experience ng world in average. But then sa Philippines, iba naman. Pero yung global kasi, yung global temperature, yun. Tapos yung kaya na silang pagbabawas ng ice sa Antarctica. Yung tapos
Climate change is one of the most intensely studied phenomena in the world today. Thousands of studies conducted by researchers around the world have documented changes in land, air, and ocean temperatures, along with glacial melting, shrinking sea ice, rising sea levels, ocean acidification, and increased atmospheric water vapor. Here's a brief summary of what we know so far about our changing climate. Global atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide have reached 410 parts per million for the first time in about 3 million years. For comparison, just 50 years ago, CO2 levels stood at 325 parts per million. Carbon dioxide prevents solar energy from radiating back to space, effectively warming the atmosphere. The 5 warmest years on record were the last 5. The 20 warmest occurred in the last 22 years. Since the year 1900, the average global temperature has risen 1 degree Celsius, or 1.8 Fahrenheit, with 2/3 of this increase in the last 44 years. Without major reductions in CO2 emissions, temperatures could reach 5 degrees centigrade or 9 degrees Fahrenheit over pre-industrial levels by the year 2100. For perspective on how radical that is, a 2.8 degrees centigrade drop was enough to bury a portion of North America under a towering mass of ice 20,000 years ago. Wildfire season across the globe is 20% longer than it was in 1980 as a direct result of a warmer, drier climate. In the western United States between 1986 and 2003, wildfires burned nearly 4 times as often, covered 6 times the land area, and lasted 5 times longer compared to the years 1970 to 1986. At the same time, heavy rainfall is increasing in intensity and frequency. The peak rate of rainfall during storms has increased by 30% over the past 60 years. Remarkably, the speed of hurricanes and tropical storms has slowed by about 10% in the last 70 years, with landfalling Atlantic hurricanes slowing by 20%. A slower storm means that inland areas will experience increased flooding. The rise of extreme weather events like hurricanes has already taken a heavy toll. Since 1980, they've cost the United States alone over $1.1 trillion. Average sea levels have risen by 18 to 20 centimeters, or 7 to 8 inches over the last century. In the United States, the incidence of daily tidal flooding is accelerating in more than 25 Atlantic and Gulf Coast cities. A sea level rise of as much as 2.4 meters by the end of the century cannot be ruled out. If that happens, a range of coastal cities, including New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Bangkok, Amsterdam, and the entire nation of Bangladesh will be underwater. Recent studies project that by 2050, over 143 million people could be forced to migrate directly due to climate-related events in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Asia. The consequences of human-induced climate change are altering the world as we've known it so quickly, we may not be able to prepare and adapt. Though many still choose to avoid thinking about climate change or treat it as an unproven possibility, its effects are blatant and escalating. There is no denying that it's here.
about sa climate change or greenhouse effect is mas lalo siyang napapabilis dahil sa mga nagagawa nating polusyon tulad ng usok, pagsisiga at iba pa. Pero ang simpleng paraan para mapunan natin yung mga problema na yun o makatulong man lang tayo sa pagbabawas ng mga polusyon is pagbabawas ng kalat, pag-minimize ng usok, paninigarilyo at iba pa. Bilang isang mamayan or estudyante, isa na rin ako sa mga nakakaranas ng climate change na kung saan nakakaranas tayo ng panlalamig ng panahon, ng init, ng tag-ulan at iba pa.
Wait lang. 1, 2, 3, go. Bilang estudyante, dapat alam natin ang may dudulot ng climate change sa ating bansa at sa atin. Ngayon, alam na natin ang epekto nito sa atin. Dapat hindi ito magtuloy-tuloy dahil maaaring maapektuhan ang ating kalusugan, tirahan at pagkain. At kung magtuloy-tuloy ito, ay maaaring makasama sa atin.